we bought out Wheat State Distilling with all their equipment, all their barrels of whiskey. I want to catch up on the status of that equipment. Now, we were going to hire some professionals instead. I just got a crew of rednecks. I was hoping to have a place to put all of this pretty soon. I really do need y'all's input. A lot of decisions, so let's talk about them. So there are a lot of questions and a lot of things we got to catch up on in regards to us building our own distillery. Now, y'all saw the video where we bought out Wheat State Distilling with all their equipment, all their barrels of whiskey.
So we have a big still. It's a Koth, made in Germany, handmade.
And this is the little still that they were distilling here. Thank you. Moment of truth. And that's single barrel worthy right there. I want to catch up on the status of that equipment, those barrels, what we're doing, the decisions we're having to make to try to land on our own location to set that up and start distilling, how we're going about getting our own whiskey into the market. And there were a lot of questions there that we're going to get answered in this video. First, let's talk about the equipment. So when I decided to acquire that equipment, the first thing I started doing was looking at how to get it here. And a lot of y'all had suggestions on hiring this and that and all these professionals and big trucks, and we considered those. But it didn't exactly work out that way. We were on a very short timetable with a fairly limited budget. I mean, we had a decent budget, but I had to consider the budget transporting and storing and some of the other moving pieces we'll talk about in this video. So it looked like we might be in a location in very short order, which means we need to store these for a very limited time. So I didn't want to be in a big lease. So I bought this trailer, actually had this trailer custom made so that it was big enough for the pot from the pot still to actually fit into. And because this pot was so tall and we had to put it on a skid to load it in here, we had to make this thing like 8 feet tall, and they don't make 8-foot trailers. We wanted something obviously where we could travel with this thing, but we needed a place to store it as well. And I could have rented a warehouse or something like that, $1,000+ a month to get this thing into, or I could just buy a trailer. We're gonna need an enclosed trailer for various things anyway. So we've got that in here. We've also got the mash cooker, and a lot of the pieces of the actual columns are in here as well. So on the side door here, you can see the mash cooker in here, some of the column pieces and things. My toolbox right there from Sonic Tools. Now, we were gonna hire some professionals instead. I just got a crew of rednecks and we went up there, we caravanned up there, broke all this equipment down in 3 days, like literally showed up 4 o'clock one day, 5 o'clock 3 days later, everything is loaded up and we are headed back south. It would have been a great video. It would have been probably the best video ever on this channel. How do I put this? There are guidelines and regulations we're not sure we're aware of or we're in strict compliance with when it comes to transporting some of the things we had to transport. And so we felt like it was in our best interest not to film that and put it on the internet. But we got the job done. Everything was transported safely and successfully. All the barrels of whiskey are resting right now at John Emerald, ready for us to do stuff. We've already rebarreled some of them, running some experiments. That whiskey gives us the opportunity to start learning some lessons. We're trying to get our own brand done. We've done the Oak Bowery 1 blend, which we'll talk about a little more here in a minute. You know, that's all just lessons. There's a lot of skills, a lot of relationships, a lot of things we have to learn to pull this off. And this allows us now to get started. We've also got our mash skid and boiler over here covered up. That was supposed to go in my garage, but you'll see here in a minute, it wouldn't fit. I have 10-foot tall garage doors. That's over 10 feet tall when it's sitting on its trailer. So right now, these are being stored at an undisclosed location, looking for the right place to put them. We had one place we were considering, we were hoping would happen really quickly. If that doesn't actually happen, we may end up having to find storage, especially for this boiler over here that probably doesn't need to be sitting outside. The rest of the equipment is just hanging out here in my garage, along with the festival stuff that I haven't had time to go through, taking up space that I need for things like my Impala project that I'm never gonna find time to actually finish. I was hoping it wouldn't be here long. I was hoping to have a place to put all of this pretty soon, but it's not looking so optimistic that it's gonna happen fast. It really does depend on the decisions that are made moving forward and the direction that we end up choosing, and really which location we end up choosing and what the costs are gonna be And you know, are we building from scratch? Are we renovating? Whatever. A lot of decisions. So let's talk about them. The big decisions we need to make are around where we're going to put this and how we're going to pay for it. And I really do need y'all's input on what y'all think about these different options. Now, I probably shouldn't be sharing these at this stage, but we want to do this in the open. We want y'all to participate and help, and there's no way to really do that other than sharing what we can share. So one option we have for where to put it is this old airplane hangar. There's good and bad with all of these options. With this one, it's 20 minutes from where I live. A little more rural, I should say. It is in a city limits, but it's a super small town without a lot going on. Now there's a main thoroughfare, goes right by here, so it's super easy to get here. One turn off the interstate, you drive right by this property after 20 or so miles of driving. The downside though, they're not even sure they can get us the utilities that we need to even start. Like, we're not sure we can even get gas here to run that boiler, and they're pretty confident they won't be able to provide enough water if we start distilling at scale. So once we have a column still and we're trying to put out a bunch of barrels of whiskey, could dig a well, like you could get an electric boiler, like there's a lot of ways around that. The city actually owns this property, and we've had some problems communicating with them. Like, there's new information every time we go back to have an interaction with somebody at the city that's getting a little frustrating. And so we'll see if we can come to terms with this. But the good being, this is the cheapest option. Like, this is the most affordable option. We could buy this. I don't know exactly what renovations would cost, but we could tiptoe into it. And it's got a ton of acreage. Like, this is gonna be, again, they keep coming back with new information, but let's say 20 to 30-ish acres by the time it's all said and done, plus this 6,000 or 7,000 square foot hangar that we could build it with. Really cool place, but if we're gonna have a tasting room, then we have to draw people out here. And this is a poorer area. When you start doing tasting rooms, especially for craft distilleries, that's not an affordable pour for a lot of people. You know, you're gonna have to drive people from 20 minutes away to be able to have a tasting room here and have it be profitable. Now, you could do like a lot of folks have done, just set up a distillery. Don't have a tasting room. But I've talked to quite a few smaller distilleries, and their tasting room is 50+% of their actual revenue. Now, I think we will put out more whiskey. I think we'll have more whiskey out there and generate more revenue from that than they are, but it's still an important part to try to gather as much revenue as possible to fund all of the crazy things that we want to do. This, though, has enough land to throw up rick houses to basically grow into whatever we want it to be. It's just out in the middle of nowhere. We don't know if we'll be able to get the utilities, and the city that owns it has been, making it a little more complicated than it needs to be. I like this option because I like to, not have to worry about how we're going to fund it. Like, this is the option I think we could actually afford right now, whereas some of these other options are going to require more significant investments. Let's look at one of those options. The largest vineyard here in the state of Alabama is also for sale. Now, I haven't talked to them in several months. I assume it's still for sale. It's still online for sale, but this is probably going to be 5 times the cost of the hangar. It's equally as remote, out a little more toward the lake, so a little higher end clientele, but the hangar has 10,000 cars a day driving by it. I'd be surprised if this one has a couple of hundred. You're definitely still going to have to draw, but there's a lot of really nice houses being built out here. It's a 100-acre property-ish. It's already got a nice big event center that we could use for things, and it's already got a facility making wine. So all the infrastructure and everything is already built, but you gotta have a payment on something 5 times as much, and this is an awful lot of expensive land to maintain. And so you've got all these grapes. I don't know how to make wine. I don't know exactly what we would do with it. We could learn, we could figure it out, we could find things to do, but it's just a lot more cost. Cost, no object. I'm in love with this property. Like, this would probably be the one for me if it weren't going to be just 5 times as much. Like, we would probably have to raise a significant amount of money just to be able to afford this. Whereas I can tiptoe into the hangar, there is no tiptoe here. You have to jump in with both feet. That just concerns me a little bit, right? That's a big risk. I try to take calculated risk. This is the best option as far as going big. Like, plenty of room to build rick houses and do something maybe a little more like Starlight, right? Do an actual draw, an attraction, like a reason for people to come out here. But my goodness, that's a lot to jump on. So this is an option we've been considering. I keep coming back to it and going away from it, coming back to it. Like, I love it. I want this property. You know, we've still got to endure the cost of actually making barrels of whiskey and getting it into the market and all those things. We'll talk about financing on it here in just a little bit when we talk about money in general. I know, you know, one of the questions we're going to answer, a lot of folks have asked to be able to invest. We're going to answer that question here in just a second, but just know this is one of the more costly, but also one of the bigger visions here at this particular vineyard. Let's look at another option we're considering. The city of Opelika is also developing this creek walk in an area that's convenient to Auburn and Opelika. There's lots here, probably get a lot between 5 and 10 acres if we really wanted it. It's reasonably priced for the land. It's in a great area right in between Auburn and Opelika. It's on, you know, right off that main corridor that leads to the hangar, but obviously not visible from those 10,000 cars that drive by. So not a lot of traffic actually driving by it, but really, really convenient to get to. The downside being that it's in the city proper. It's in an area that they are wanting to develop a certain way. And so they're gonna have a lot of restrictions around what the building needs to look like. And so we're gonna have to go a little higher end. We're gonna have to go a little bigger right out of the gate. There's no renovating and tiptoeing. Like, we're gonna have to go a little bit bigger. And obviously, if we can get 5 or 10 acres, we'll have a little room to grow, but we're having to build the entire infrastructure from the ground up, paving, parking, dirt work, like the whole thing. And I have no idea what that needs to look like and what it's going to actually cost at this point. So this is the most uncertain, although pretty good location. This is the area in Auburn and Opelika that's going to develop the most over the next 5 or 10 years. I mean, there's literally a Publix shopping center going in a stone's throw from here. And I think that'll really spark a lot of development down this corridor, a lot of residential out in this area. Probably a little cheaper than the Vineyard, a lot more expensive than the Hangar, but also a great area for a tasting room. Like, this is the best out of the ones we've looked at so far for that experience part of it. And we definitely want this to be an experience. We want y'all to be able to come hang out with us. We want to have events. We want to be able to do things. The Vineyard, lots of space to do that. Lots of infrastructure already there to do that. Here, a little more convenient for locals, but if you're traveling, probably doesn't matter that much. Now, there are options in downtown Opelika. I love downtown Opelika. This was the whole reason I moved to this city, is this little historic railroad downtown here. This is one of my favorite buildings. It's now for sale. It's at auction, but it's an entire city block. I don't have city block money. And so this would probably be twice as much money to get into as the Vineyard. 50% more to buy, at least minimum, and then you've got a bunch of renovations. Now, you would have an entire city block you could do all sorts of crazy things with. You either wouldn't run out of space very quickly, or you could develop this into other businesses, cash flowing opportunities. I'm not that guy. I don't have those kind of skills or resources to do that. This, although I really want it, cost prohibitive. The entire city block across the railroad tracks over there, also for sale. Also at an auction, but those all have water damage, and you're basically buying brick shells that you can't really change the front of it too much. I mean, this is a historic district, so you would have to gut them, rebuild them. Would be a really cool place, but similarly priced to this by the time you bought it and renovated all of that. Down on the other end there, the event center, the old Coca-Cola bottling plant, also for sale, also more expensive than this building, in better shape as far as I could tell, but still, you would have to like shut down the event center, which you're buying a business, not just a property, and you would have to just throw the business away to be able to make whiskey there. So these down here make a lot of sense from a tasting room perspective, because there's already people down here. There's people at restaurants, Mexican restaurant right there, restaurants over there, Red Clay and John Emerald already down here. So you've already got kind of a built-in audience. It's an easy place for people to get. There's parking, there's infrastructure here, but you would run out of space with most of these at some point and have to have some property out in the country anyway. So if you got a really small property here, you would have to buy property out in the country right away, because whiskey aging rickhouses take up a lot of space. If you buy an entire city block, I don't know if I'd ever run out of space if I just used this whole building for whiskey aging. But anybody got $3 million laying around? Because I don't. And there are several other places downtown to put it that are a little smaller, but they require a similar level of investment. This is where my heart wants to put it. I want to put it in downtown Opelika. I want to make it a draw. I want to bring people down here. I want everybody to see how cool this little town is. I want to help all the other small businesses around here, you know, have a bigger audience. It's tough for me to just give up on the downtown option, even though there's nothing ideal. Like, can we find a place that's at least good enough to distill down here, and then we just buy some land out somewhere to put up rick houses? Renting is not the best option here. There are some options. They are not even close to ideal. And then we're gonna have to spend a whole lot of money developing those out. And we're just putting money into somebody else's property. Not an ideal scenario. We don't have like the perfect option right now. So I really want y'all's input on what you think the perfect option is. If you were choosing, which one of these directions would you go? Would you go downtown where tasting room is going to be king? You're gonna have an audience, a little easier to draw, got all the infrastructure. Would you build new out where it's a developing area, a lot of new houses going out in that general vicinity? Would you go big and go out into the country and get the Vineyard, even though it's 20 minutes on the outskirts of town, but it's a 100-acre, you know, big, huge facility? Or would you take the small town approach that's a little easier for you to tiptoe into and to potentially afford? The problem is that we're really building two businesses simultaneously. We're building a distillery that produces whiskey, but we're also going to put a whiskey brand into the market beforehand. Like, we give a lot of flack to folks that source whiskey. And it's not because we don't think you can't make great whiskey, you can't do something unique. It's just that if I'm spending my money for something sourced, somebody needs to tell me it's unique and different. With that, you could go source whiskey. We could not do a distillery. We could just go source whiskey. We could do blending. We could put it out. There's a lot of high-end brands out there that do that. A lot of successful folks. Penelope blew up sourcing whiskey from MGP. Old Carter, they're not distilling a drop. I mean, you've seen a lot of brands be really successful not making whiskey. It's not what I want. I want to make our own whiskey. Problem is it's just going to cost an amount of money that I don't have. Like, we have to find this facility, build out this facility, and then distill for 5 or 6 years before anything hits the market and we see any sort of return on that. I don't have that kind of budget. And so we're going to source whiskey alongside it to start learning those lessons, finding distribution, building relationships, and trying to get a product into the market while our own distillate is maturing to age. We've got that we have to do, and that has a certain cost structure, although the return is a lot faster. The costs are less there, the return is faster. Like, we could just do nothing right now, focus on that until that generates revenue, and then come back and see what the options are for putting the distillery somewhere at that point. I'm impatient, so I really want to see some progress on it. We're probably going to try to do them simultaneously. We're going to be working on that. We'll have some content, some videos coming up on sourcing and going through all of this, and y'all need to let me know as well. Do you like this type of content? I love the bourbon hunts. We're going to continue doing the bourbon hunts. I'm not going to be able to do 52 of them a year, so we have one each and every week. And so being able to do something while I'm here, whether it's distillery content or whatever, you know, fill in the gap. And that gets me to your questions and comments. We had this one guy who's, oh, you're not a whiskey review channel anymore. I'm out. I'm unsubscribing. We really haven't posted any whiskey reviews in over a year. I mean, we're going to get back to doing reviews. We're not going to do them the way that everybody else does them. We're not going to do it the way we used to do it. We think those should be really short form. We may do shorts. We may do Instagram posts. Like, we're working on a lot of ideas there to try to get reviews back into the channel next year. But we haven't been a review channel in forever. So, you know, we're really more of a bourbon hunting channel at this point, more of a social aspect of whiskey type of channel. We've had a lot of people reach out, want jobs, want to volunteer. I'd love to get your information, get you on a list. I don't know when we'll have jobs or have work to be done for volunteers, but I want to be able to communicate with folks that want to help. We've had a lot of people reach out wanting to invest, and some wanting to, you know, do a fundraise and just try to raise some money that way. and some wanting to, put down a substantial amount of money to invest in doing this. When you talk about, let's say fundraise versus investment side, would it be nice to have more funds and resources and be able to get into this really, really quickly? Yeah, absolutely. Who wouldn't want to be able to go hard? But at the same time, I don't know what they're expecting back from me, and I don't want this to get into a situation to where it's no longer fun anymore. And money oftentimes does that. And so when people put that money out, they've got certain expectations that at some point, you've got to start cutting corners or making decisions not based on what's best for the product, but what's best for the return. And I don't usually do that. What is best for the current situation and decision that I'm making, money be damned. I don't want to change that. I want to really focus on the product that we're putting out and not be hindered at some point because somebody needs a return on that. There may be a way to do that, but I've got to wrap my head around that, how that would work, because that's an area I'm ignorant. I've got a moderately successful business. It's led us here, but I bootstrapped that whole thing, which is why it took 20 years to do. And I don't think I've got 20 years left in me to get this distillery started. Like, we need to be 20 years into producing whiskey. I want to hear from you if you're interested in investing. I'm open to conversations right now so that I can educate myself and learn more about what that might look like, but just know I'm a little apprehensive about that. As far as a fundraiser goes, we could have 1,000 people give me $500 and we would have enough money to probably get into any of these properties we wanted. I mean, that wouldn't buy them, but that would give us some operating capital and a down payment. Like, that's a lot of money. And, y'all work hard for your money just like I do. And the last thing I want to do is for somebody to feel like I took advantage of them. The last thing I want is for somebody to think they gave me money and I scammed them or I did something nefarious. I'm not saying we won't do it, but it's another thing I've got to just kind of figure out how. Like, I would much rather provide value and then somebody buy something. I'm down with that. What's the value for you to invest? Like, it could be proper investment and you get a share. It could just be a fundraise and like selling a brick at the distillery, or we do a wall and, you get to put a quote on it or something. Like, there's, but like, what's that value worth? I don't know. I know a lot of y'all want to help and I want you to be able to help, but I want you to get something out of that help. I don't like taking money from folks. I like giving. I want to give stuff. I want to be down here helping people. I want to be making great products that are well worth the money that you have to invest in it. I don't know how we get there from here, but just know I'm going to put everything I can into it, both from a work perspective and a financial perspective. We may have to dial this back and it may be a little redneck operation in a pole barn out in the country somewhere, but we're going to figure out how. I appreciate y'all watching all the way to the end of this. Again, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. What decisions would you make? What are your thoughts about all of this nonsense? Should we do it? Should we not do it? It's going to be a stressful road with an awful lot of work. I want y'all on board. I want y'all to support it. And if y'all don't think it's a good idea, then it's probably not a good idea. So we'll see y'all in the next one.